Using ELPA 21 assessment results to understand student performance. In this video, we address the second guiding question of this module. How can educators use key components of ELPA 21 assessment results to understand student performance? There are many purposes for using outcomes from the annual ELPA 21 assessments. The scores measure students' progress toward English language proficiency and inform program eligibility determinations. The scores can also be used by policymakers and administrators for accountability and program evaluation purposes. But because we created these modules with teachers in mind, we especially want to illustrate how the assessment results can be a valuable source of information for classroom educators. First, the ELPA 21 score reports can help teachers gather baseline information about their students' language proficiency at the beginning of the school year. It is important to remember, however, that the ELPA 21 results are just one measure of a student's progress toward English language proficiency, and that these results provide specific but limited information. Like all measures of student proficiency, the scores should be interpreted along with other academic information gathered throughout the school year. Second, the information contained in the assessment score reports can help teachers with instructional planning by highlighting the specific ELP standards they should focus on and by calling attention to scaffolds or supports that students may need to improve their academic English proficiency. Toward the end of this video, we will show you how to directly connect the ELPA 21 assessment results to the ELP standards level descriptors. We hope you will leave with some concrete tools for using these assessment results to inform your instruction. For the purposes of this module, we will focus on the individual score reports from the ELPA 21 assessment rather than roster or aggregate score reports. We will also focus specifically on three key components of these score reports that are most relevant for this module: domain scores, performance levels and descriptors, and the proficiency determination. This video is not intended to serve as a comprehensive guide for interpreting score reports, but rather a brief demonstration of how educators can use the assessment results to supplement their understanding of their students' needs with regard to the ELP standards. On the next few slides, we'll describe these key components of the score reports in greater detail. Before we do so, we want to point out that the format and exact details of individual score reports may vary based on your state. Therefore, the images on the following slides are just graphic depictions and may not represent what your students' score reports will actually look like. We encourage you to refer to your individual state's score reports for the exact representations of assessment results in your setting. Because ELPA 21 measures English language proficiency using the 4 domains of listening, reading, speaking, and writing, your students' achievement on the assessment will also be reported by these 4 domains. Your state may use a numeric scale score to describe performance on each of these 4 domains, and the 4 domains may be reported in a different order depending on your state. The ELPA 21 assessment will also report achievement in each domain using performance levels. Each domain score is classified into one of 5 performance levels. On the ELPA 21 individual score reports, depending on your state, these performance levels may be numbered 1 through 5. Or they may be given the corresponding labels beginning, early intermediate, intermediate, early advanced, or advanced. Each level will also correspond to a descriptor called an Achievement Level Descriptor, or ALD, which is a concise statement describing what a student who scores at a certain level in a domain knows and can do in that domain. These descriptors are specific to the domain and to the performance level. They help illuminate what the domain is assessing for each grade or grade band and how each performance level, 1 through 5, is distinguished from one another. Rather than reporting an overall composite score, as is traditionally done, The ELPA 21 score report provides profiles to describe students' performance across domains. These profiles may be expressed in one of two ways, either as 4 numbers representing the level of performance on each of the 4 domains, or as rules that summarize a common pattern for sets of profiles. The hypothetical results shown here would correspond to a profile of 4-3-4-3, or a rule that no domain score falls below level 3. A profile provides more instructional information about students who may have the same overall score, but differ in skills and academic needs based on their domain results, which would in turn warrant different English instructional supports. ELPA 21 has 3 categories to summarize achievement across the 4 domains and to make an overall proficiency determination. Different combinations of skills and abilities across the domains define the 3 categories, called emerging, progressing, or proficient. The proficiency determination identifies ELs whose language skills enable full independent participation in grade-level academic contexts, and those ELs who are still working toward proficiency. We won't go into all the different combinations of domain scores that fall into each of these different proficiency categories here, but these rules will be available to you within the score interpretation materials. We want to take a minute here to address a question that will most likely be raised, which is, what level on each domain is considered proficient? Although performance on a single domain cannot determine English language proficiency, ELPA 21 considers level 4 or above on each domain to represent the level of English language skills necessary to independently produce, interpret, collaborate on, and succeed in grade-appropriate content-related academic tasks in English. Thus, a profile of level 4 or higher in all domains would be reported as proficient on a student's individual score report. Please remember, however, that the ELP standards and ELPA 21 assessments assume simultaneous development of language and content area knowledge, skills, and abilities. Because ELs have the same potential as their non-EL peers, they do not need to wait until they are considered proficient in English to participate in content area instruction and assessment. We just presented an overview of how ELPA 21 will share assessment information with you about your students. So now, how can you make use of this information as you plan instruction for your students? As you've just seen, your students' performance levels based on the assessment will be organized by domain on their score reports. But the level descriptors that go with the ELP standards are organized by the 10 standards. Knowing the relative strength of your students' achievement in each domain is very useful. But how can you determine which ELP standards to focus on in order to target a certain domain? One way to figure this out is to review the standards and select those that pertain to each domain as you are interpreting your students' results and planning classroom instruction. Or you can consult the alternate organization of the ELP standards by modality and domain on page 5 of the standards document. But these methods can be time-consuming when you're thinking about several domains and various performance levels. To help make this translation process a little easier for you, we want to share a resource called the Achievement Level Indicators, or the ALIs, which reorganize the ELP standards by domain. The ALIs present the ELP standards and level descriptors for each grade level band and domain in the form of a table. The numbers in parentheses in the table represent the ELP standards that pertain to that particular domain. So, for example, the domain of reading comprehension is addressed by standards 1, 2, 5, 6, and 8. The phrases after these numbers are the level descriptors for those particular standards across the 5 performance levels. Let's use an example to illustrate how you might use this resource. Suppose that you are a first grade teacher and have a student or significant portion of your students who scored at a level 3 or intermediate level in reading. Which standards would you target in order to bolster their reading skills? By reviewing the achievement level indicators for grade 1 in reading, you can see that standards 1, 2, 5, 6, and 8 address reading. Thus, you may select instructional activities that focus on one or more of these standards. In addition, knowing that level 4 represents descriptions of engagement with grade level content at a level comparable to non-ELs, you might look to the descriptors in the level 4 column to inform your expectation of what you want your students to be able to do as they progress toward independent participation in grade-appropriate activities. One other helpful way to use the achievement level indicators is to consult them alongside the ELP Standards at a Glance document, which places all the ELP standards for each grade level band on the same page. By putting the ALIs side by side with the ELP standards, you can easily cross-reference the standards implicated in your domains of interest with the full language of the standards and their level descriptors. You can download the achievement level indicators by clicking on the button on this screen or by visiting the resources section of this module. Before we conclude this video, we want to point out an important difference between achievement as measured on the ELPA 21 assessment and the descriptions of skills and knowledge in the ELP standards level descriptors. The level descriptors are an attempt to think about how knowledge and skills might look for students at different places in their development of language, so that we can plan instruction to meet their needs and scaffold them toward proficiency. A student's performance level on each of the 4 domains, on the other hand, is a measurement of that student's achievement as a result of administering and calibrating the ELPA 21 assessment. We find that it is helpful to keep this distinction in mind when thinking about how and when to use information from the assessment results versus the ELP standards level descriptors. We hope that this video addressed the second guiding question for this module. How can educators use key components of ELPA 21 assessment results to understand student performance? The resources that we mentioned in this video, along with a glossary of terms, will be available in the resource section of the module. In order to apply what you've learned and exercise your understanding of these resources, we encourage you now to imagine that you are analyzing assessment results for your students. Choose a grade level that is applicable to you. If you have score reports handy for your students, use those. If not, then imagine that a student scored at a level 2 or 3 in one of the domains. You choose. Now, use the ALIs to map these results back onto the standards and their associated level descriptors. What standards might you want to focus on in order to support this student's learning? What knowledge and skills do you want this student to be able to demonstrate? What other sources of information would you also use to gain a fuller understanding of this student's progress toward proficiency?